There you go.
Yay.
Hello.
Good evening, everybody. Happy
How y'all
Thursday.
doing? Hi, Robin.
Welcome. Oh my, we have quite
Hi,
a few people on.
Angie, Karen,
So,
Brian, Robin, Rose.
Richard,
Hey, guys.
Rose.
Peoples,
Wow.
good to see you all.
Thank you so much
I'm
for
giving
joining
you little
us.
hearts and I'm clapping. Yay.
So glad you joined us. So,
Clapping and doing emojis. Woohoo.
well, this is it. We are the last few verses of chapter 36, the last chapter, the book of Numbers.
Book of Numbers coming to an end. So I just was making a flyer for the next book, Deuteronomy.
We'll continue
So
on.
we're
yeah.
excited we're excited always to just keep moving forward in God's word, right? So it's been so cool. So we'll do the end of 36 tonight, and then next week we're going to do the Twitter summary
Yep.
of the whole book of Numbers.
Right.
And I gave you guys an assignment last week, but in case you forgot, for next week, I mean, if you're not going to be here next week, you could put it in the comments today, but I just wanted to know, like, what's your Twitter summary for the book of
Right.
Numbers? Like, is there one section or verse or concept from the book of Numbers that really struck home with you? So, feel free to bring that comment either next week, or like I said, if you want to put it on there tonight, say, here's my Twitter summary, and tell us your sentence. That'd be great, because it's just really, really cool when we get to interact with each other and participate. And if you're watching on a channel out there, whether it's on YouTube or one of the exclaimed channels or 14.6 Church channel, and you cannot make a comment, here's why. You need to create a little login, and then you can make a comment. So we'd love to have you do that. It doesn't have to be, it's not a big long form. It's just like your name, maybe your phone number. I don't even know if it asks that, but just create a login name and a password. And then
Yeah, I think up here somewhere. Oh, other way. Up
you
here.
click on something like over here on this hamburger.
Yeah,
This thing is called a
that way.
hamburger. Anyway, the little lines. Click on that and then log in. Create a little login. We'd love to have you participate. Hey, Mama Rose. Good evening.
Hello.
Good to see you.
So yeah, so it's funny. We call it a Twitter summary. Twitter doesn't exist anymore.
That's
but
right. The
it
X,
doesn't have the same impact as an X summary.
Yeah, it's
But-
fine. I mean,
but-
people still know what Twitter was, I
Yeah.
think. And when it was created, it was Twitter. So-
Right. So we'll start that,
But yeah,
and we'll finish. I mean, we'll do that next week.
next week.
And it is so much fun reading through those little summary statements for each chapter, because it just brings back a flood of recall and helps us to solidify the accounts that are in the book of Numbers, which really covers about 40 years, but has so much depth and power to it that I think when we started the study of Numbers, one of the commentators that I came across said that they never start a new series on a book in the New Testament without referring back to Numbers. They said, like, if you're starting a new class or a new group of people who are brand new believers or something like that, of course we want to get them into the Bible right away, that they start with the book of Numbers so that it lays the foundation so that many, or if not most, of the concepts in the New Testament make sense. Why do we say these things? Why did Jesus do these things, do the things that he did? Why did he answer in the ways that he did? Oftentimes, if you refer back to the book of Numbers, the foundations were laid there. So, and it reiterates our point that that every single book of the Bible points to Jesus.
Amen.
I was
Amen.
so delighted. I happened to be on YouTube the other night doing some research for sermon prep, and I came across a YouTube channel, and the pastor that was speaking, he said, I just need you to know, every single book of the Bible points to Jesus. If you don't see Jesus in every single book of the Bible, you're reading it wrong.
Wow.
I'm like,
I know.
wow.
I know, it's like
I was so excited.
Like we're doing Ezra on Sunday mornings
Yeah,
right now at
yeah.
the Light at 9:30. But it's just very, very cool how even the old book of Ezra, like this minor prophet, book, it all points to Jesus.
Right.
For
Oh, we got
building
some
of the
flashing going on.
tabernacle. Yeah, I see that. So anyway, so I don't know what's happening with that.
Right. Sorry about the flashing. I'm not quite sure what's going on there.
I'll try and see if it makes a difference.
We'll try a couple of things and try and calm that down.
Sometimes that calms down. Hey, Rich, good to see you. And Brian, good to see you.
Hey. Nice to see everybody there. So, Brian, it looked like you had a beautiful day out at the park with the runner ducks. So that was cool to see that picture. So here we go. So the last few verses of Numbers, we started to dive into it last week, but it's definitely worth reiterating those first couple of verses because that'll make sense of the rest of what we're going to read tonight. And Gay said, I'm forbidden from saying that we may end early tonight, so I'm not going to say it.
Don't say it. Stop saying that.
So, but here we go. So recall that previously the first portion of the book of chapter 36 was dealing with sanctuary cities and dealing with protecting people who had killed somebody. It was distinguishing between somebody who kills another person with malicious intent, murder, versus somebody who accidentally kills somebody just through an accident. Manslaughter. Right. It was distinguishing between those two tragedies.
Situations, right.
Tragedies, and distinguishing between those and laying the groundwork for a legal system that would protect the innocent. Well, the guilty, they're guilty, they killed somebody, but those that did not do it with intent. And we talked about sanctuary cities being set up across the promised land such that people could flee there, and it was reasonable for them to flee there. And the restrictions, the stipulations upon them remaining safe in those sanctuary cities was that they would never leave those sanctuary cities as long as the ruling or the serving high priest was alive.
Right.
Once that individual, whether they were young or old, once they passed away, then the individual in the sanctuary city for manslaughter was free to go back to his homeland or to his home city with no it would not be allowed for the blood avenger to kill that individual, as was the practice of the day.
Right.
Okay. So we spent a considerable amount of time talking about that and the wisdom of that and the precedent of that for our legal system. And then the last portion of the last chapter deals with a unique situation that was set up or was discussed several chapters prior because of a unique familial situation. So let's dive into that, we're going to start with chapter 36, verse 1. Okay.
Oh, we're going to repeat a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay. So verse 1 of chapter 36. Now the heads of the fathers' households of the family of the sons of Gilead, the sons of Machir, the sons of Manasseh, of the families of the sons of Joseph, came forward and spoke before Moses and before the leaders, the heads of the fathers' households of the sons of Israel.
Okay, so these individuals, these leaders of this clan, they're pleading a special case because they're living a special case. What is it? Let's find out. Verse 2.
And they said, the Lord commanded my Lord to give the land by lot to the sons of Israel as an inheritance, and my Lord was commanded by the Lord, Yahweh, to give the inheritance of our brother Zelophehad to his daughters.
Right, and we discussed this when we were studying it back in
it's Numbers 27.
Yeah.
I was just looking it up because I'm like, when was that?
Yeah,
it was Numbers 27.
Not that long ago.
Right, 27. This is 36. So yeah.
So there was a pleading for a special case. It's like, well, the heretical line, the inheritant line, heretical.
Yeah,
wrong word.
Inheritance.
The
line of
lineage,
inheritance.
the line of inheritance was through the sons. It was a patriarchal society, and so property and ownership and such passed down through the sons. But Zelophehad had no sons. He had
Right, he had
daughters, but he
daughters.
had no sons. And back when we were studying it in Numbers 27, we talked about that very case applied to one of Gay's aunts and uncles.
Oh, yeah.
In that they
had no sons.
They had
They
no
had a
sons.
farm.
They had 3 daughters. They owned a farm. They owned a fairly significant farm back in Ohio,
Right.
but they had no sons.
Yeah, on all the farms, on the barns, the big large barns at the farms and back in Ohio and Indiana and
yeah.
stuff where I'm from, like it'll say, Williams and Son and Smith and Son, Johnson and
yeah,
Sons,
yeah.
that's the name of the farms, So my uncle put, Ashbaugh and Daughters because
Ashbaugh and Daughters,
yeah, because
yeah.
his last name was Ashbaugh, so
Right.
he had to put something different because he couldn't put and Sons because he didn't have sons.
Right,
So,
right.
yeah.
But of course, this is modern times, and so the legal setup was not as complicated as it would have been here. But they present a very real case. So this gentleman, a good family man, a faithful, abiding Jew, he has no sons. What do we do?
Right.
Okay, and then Moses wisely, exemplary to us, sought God's counsel, and God answered him, said, the daughters inherit it.
Mm-hmm.
But now we've just gone through several chapters where they're talking about how the land is to be passed down through families. Well, now what? Because this is where it gets sticky.
Right. Not verse 3. But if they, the daughters, marry one of the sons of another tribe of the sons of Israel, their inheritance will be withdrawn from the inheritance of our fathers and will be added to the inheritance of the tribe to which they belong or marry into. So it will be withdrawn from our allotted inheritance. So they're thinking ahead, okay, so the daughters can inherit, but if they marry someone, like not within the tribe of Manasseh,
Right.
they marry someone, in the tribe of Dan or something else, then traditionally, then their property would go with them into the marriage, but now it belongs to the tribe of Dan, and the tribe of Manasseh's allotted amount of land and property shrunk.
Right. And over the course of time, it would
They could
it
just
would, it would
keep
shrink.
getting they're shrinking smaller.
Right, and then you have this patchwork of properties owned by various tribes, which
Yeah.
was exactly what the tribal allocations were meant to prevent.
Right. I mean, so this is a really good example of boundary setting by God.
Right.
I mean, and God is setting boundaries in a very unique way, not allowing this to change by marriage and other relationships, because God is ordaining how much each tribe gets and setting the boundaries, as we studied in the previous chapter, exactly the boundaries of each tribe. So it's very interesting because we're getting ready to, in a couple weeks, maybe I'll share a slide. Next week, we're going to start a study called Good Boundaries and Goodbyes.
Good
And we're
segue.
going to teach it on Monday nights in Long Beach at the Light at the Cal Heights Baptist Church. And we're going to teach it on Saturday nights here in Westminster. But it's really a very great 6-week series, but it's very, very interesting about how looking at Scripture and looking at things like this, where God is a God of healthy boundaries. And how do we take that concept and look at Scripture and learn from it and learn how to set healthy boundaries in our relationships, in our lives. And so we're getting ready to start that study. So this is exactly an example, because even the commentators and other things we're going to talk about will explain why God was very strict about this, how the land that he is ordaining and the boundaries he set is going to not get traded or taken away by marriage. And then, like we just talked about, blood feuds, the reason he did the whole thing about the cities of refuge, and because he doesn't want his people to fall into the same patterns of all the people groups around them, where, like we talked about last week, the Hatfields and McCoys, after generations, like they just know if a Hatfield meets a McCoy, they're going to try to kill him. But they don't really know what the original offense was, and they don't really know why, So God wants his people to be, again, like he said at the very beginning with Abraham, to be a blessing to the entire world. And his people will be a blessing only if they're not embroiled in these kind of conflicts.
Right. Boundaries have very real applications. If you're familiar with the history of the American Southwest and the U.S. government interference, or I guess, I don't know what else to call it, with Native American
Yes.
tribes,
Oh, gosh.
all through Arizona, New Mexico, and all in that region, it's called the checkerboard region because the government, they literally checkerboarded the land, giving alternating patches of land to either the Hopi or the Navajo or some of the other smaller tribes in there, effectively preventing them from those tribal peoples from consolidating power and making it exceedingly difficult for them to self-govern and self-manage and it was sort of it was a nefarious way of interfering
And controlling
those
people groups.
the tribal nations, much to I think are most Americans' dismay now.
Right.
But but that was used for negative purposes.
Right.
This
God's boundaries are for
question
healthy.
is to keep this a healthy situation.
Right. Robin says, good fences make good neighbors.
Indeed,
It's
indeed.
true. That's a good statement.
Depending
I like
on what
it.
part of the country
Yes,
you
it
live
can,
in, that
yes.
can be either a really strong, powerful statement, or it can be or fences can be a very negative thing.
Yeah.
Some
What-
areas where gays families from, you put up a fence, then you're sort of declaring a distaste for your neighbor.
Yeah, exactly. In my
Yeah.
neighborhood especially, it was just this long strip of road out in the country in Ohio, and there were no fences between
Right.
properties at all. And I remember distinctly when our next door neighbor decided they had to put up a fence around their property, and like no one for miles had fences. Even really, I mean, farmers
Right.
really didn't have fences because, I mean, unless they had livestock. But most of the
Exactly.
farms in my area were like wheat and soybeans and corn, and so there weren't really fences even. And so it was very interesting. I mean, it was the talk of the neighborhood. Of course, no one went over and just said, why do you guys feel like you have to put up a fence? Like,
Right.
did we do something wrong? Are you okay? It might have been actually because they, at one point in time, I remember they owned this giant Malamute dog.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know how old I was. I was, maybe 10, 11, 12 or something. And this Malamute dog was bigger and taller than me, of course. It was ginormous. And I remember that dog, very friendly, but he used to just run after me and run up to people and, like knock us down. So I don't recall like the timing of the fence and the owning of the Malamute, but it could have been something that simple. That dog could have ran over and knocked over a neighbor, and they felt so bad,
Yeah.
that they tried to keep it like under control and on a leash, but he was so strong, maybe he
Yeah.
was always breaking out. So they just said, hey, we got to put up a fence so our dog doesn't hurt someone. But,
Adhering to Robin's comment
yes.
there.
So it could have
being
been
good neighbors.
good intention, but
Yeah.
but if in certain areas, if you don't explain it, I mean, out here, that's what I thought was so odd when I moved out here. I'm like, there's a wall between everyone's property. Like,
Yeah.
what's up with that? Like, you guys all hate each other,
Right.
Because that's what everyone thought in my neighborhood. Like, oh, that family hates us,
Right.
because they have a fence. Like, really, it probably was they just wanted. A, they wanted privacy, or B, they were just trying to control a dog that they couldn't control.
But you're right, Robin. Generally
Yes.
speaking, good boundaries,
Yes.
be they fences or
Right.
they be petunias,
Right.
good boundaries
Yes.
make for good neighbors.
Right.
So
I like your comment.
Yeah. So good comment. So, so the leaders of the tribe of Manasseh, they ask a legitimate question. So
Right.
what do we do?
What about this?
Because we know what God's verdict was, back in chapter 27, that
Right.
of course the daughters are legally
Right.
eligible to inherit the land. Of course,
Right.
right? And we talked about back then how radical that was for the patriarchal societies.
To let women inherit
surrounding-
anything
Yeah.
was really unheard of.
Absolutely
In any
radical.
other culture, it would have been like, well, tough. You got girls, so that's it.
That's
You
it.
know,
You're just
your line ends.
God
and,
must hate you because
right.
he didn't
He
provide
didn't
you
provide
with
you with
sons,
men. 'Cause-
which is what many other cultures and
Right.
so even some religions say.
Right.
Okay, but this is yet another distinctive of our what we call our Christian faith is that we see that God is not a respecter of persons, status, or gender.
Right. Checkbooks, addresses.
Yeah.
Right. You know.
Yeah. So
Okay.
So, question is asked, and it's explained again, chapter 4.
Verse 4. Verse 4. And when the Jubilee of the sons of Israel takes place, then their inheritance will be added to the inheritance of the tribe to which they belong, so their inheritance will be withdrawn from the inheritance of the tribe of our fathers.
Because again, on the Jubilee, whatever deals were made and stuff like that reverts back, but because the bride, the women had married into new tribes, those holdings would revert to their husbands'
Right.
acquisitions or holdings.
Right. So,
And then I made the comment, solving Zelophehad's, the problem with his daughters that had created another problem. How do we keep the property, the allotment, the allocation, how do we keep it in the tribe to which it was assigned throughout the generations? That's the gist of the problem. Okay. We talked about Guzik. He just reiterated what we just said. We talked about Jubilee, and I think we talked about what Jubilee involved. It released from indebtedness, bondage.
right.
Everyone that was captive or prisoner went free. Debts were forgiven.
This was supposed to be every 50th year.
And all property was returned. But as we said last week, there is no evidence that this ever actually occurred.
Because the Israelites were supposed to not work that year.
Yeah.
And because God was going to provide for them, and they never observed the Jubilee.
Right.
And they, especially in ceasing to work. And so that's why they actually they went into slavery into Babylon for 70 years. And the reason it was 70 years, because for 70 times 7, they had not observed every 50th year, they hadn't observed the Jubilee. So God said, that's your penance, your consequence.
You will be enslaved for 70 years. Anyway. Now, verse 5. Answer.
This is how they solve it. Then, verse 5, then Moses commanded the sons of Israel in accordance with the word of the Lord, saying, the tribe of the sons of Joseph is right in its statements. This is what the Lord has commanded regarding the daughters of Zelophehad, saying, let them marry whomever they wish, only they must marry within the family of the tribe of their father.
Okay.
So, I mean, remember, there's thousands of people.
Right.
So it's not like they have
of
to
thousands,
be,
yeah.
there's many, many people in each
Right.
tribe. So it's not like at this point in time, and then as they, lived there and there's more marriages and, it's just the females. So the females in these tribes have to marry within their own tribe.
Right.
It doesn't mean they have to marry their brother. That's all I'm saying.
No,
It could be a cousin, a second cousin, or,
Right. At this time,
Right.
it would have been. So they would marry within the larger scheme of the tribe of Manasseh.
Right.
Okay.
Manasseh and
Which
Gilead and
when we were studying we're doing the census information and things of that nature, we realized that there were multiple families,
right.
tens of thousands or thousands of eligible males, because again, the one census only counted fighting eligible males,
Right.
and that numbered in the tens of thousands. So
Right.
Yeah, that would not have been a problem. Okay.
Right.
So
So they are restricted more than the other tribes. The women of the
Right.
other tribes do not have this issue, but these women, because they are inheriting the family in place of a son, there's this restriction upon who they will marry.
Well, and theoretically, this would apply across the tribes because it's not just a Manasseh problem. I mean, there certainly must have been other families that.
Well, eventually, as time goes
Yeah.
down the road, as time goes on.
As time goes on,
these
yeah.
are the only ones at the time,
At
but
the
there's
time,
three different
perhaps.
ones that had, the daughters of Zelophehad, and then
Yeah.
there was some other people also. That was like 3 different ones.
But theoretically, this would have been the precedent-setting judgment or ruling that other tribes would have adhered to. So say somebody in the tribe of Reuben had only daughters, then theoretically down the road, once they were established in the promised land, then those daughters would have to choose their spouse from within the tribe, the bigger tribe of Reuben.
Right.
Okay, or whatever the tribe might be. Yeah. So.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
there's a couple of them mentioned in chapter 27.
Right. So this would have been the
But
precedent-setting
yeah.
ruling. Just like in a court of law. Huh?
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Verse 7.
So no inheritance of the sons of Israel will be transferred from tribe to tribe, for the sons of Israel shall each retain possession of the inheritance of the tribe of his fathers.
Okay.
So God's just saying, I'm setting this up, and you're not going to trade it for something else or loan it or, something else. Each one is defined. This is what I'm setting up as as boundaries.
Right. So yeah. So God is establishing the boundary. He's speaking through Moses. This is the edict or ruling that Moses gives, and this would apply again across the tribes. And this is the explanation, so that no inheritance will be transferred from tribe to tribe.
And verse 8, and every daughter who comes into possession of an inheritance of any tribe, so this is handling future occurrences, like Dan was saying, of the sons of Israel, shall marry one of the family of the tribe of her father, so stay within her own tribe, so that the sons of Israel may each possess the inheritance of his fathers. So no inheritance will be transferred from one tribe to another, for the tribes of the sons of Israel shall each retain possession of its own inheritance.
Okay. And
so God's saying, don't mess this up.
Right.
I'm doing this for a reason.
And in a negative sense, this is not such an unusual type of practice, but in a negative sense, the royal families of Europe, medieval Europe, they adhere to this type of thinking so strongly and so inward looking that they actually created a lot of problems. So, and there was a lot of genetic disaster.
Yeah.
If you study the royal families of Europe, and you see all kinds of ranging from hemophilia to gross deformities to all kinds of genetic maladies brought on by insisting that. Of course, we're dealing with a much smaller population.
Smaller population and close relatives continuing to marry close relatives.
Yeah, a huge problem with the passage of time. I mean, 17th century Europe versus a couple thousand years ago. So,
right.
Yeah. So, but the idea was that they so strongly did not want to dilute the royal lineage, not understanding the genetics involved, whereas this is a much larger population sample.
Right. God's not saying you have to marry your closest relative.
Exactly.
They have to be from exactly the same bloodline or anything like that. They just have to be from this greater tribe, original tribe. So verse 10, just as the Lord had commanded Moses, so the daughters of Zelophehad did. Mahlah, Tirzah, Holgah, Milcah, and Noah, the daughters of Zelophehad, married their uncle's sons.
So this would be cousins, or perhaps the way the terminology is, it could be second cousins or something like that. Okay. Which we know still even occurs to this day. Verse 12.
Yeah, on NLT just says married cousins on their father's side. Yeah. So it wouldn't necessarily have to be the exact, like, uncle's cousin, you know, uncle. So cousins on their father's side, like you said, could be first, second, third cousins. So verse 12, they married those from the families of the sons of Manasseh, the son of Joseph, and their inheritance remained within the tribe of the family of their father.
Okay. And again, oftentimes the Hebrew meaning of some of these titles, the translators attempt to get as close as they possibly can, but sometimes we simply don't have the English word to describe the exact relationship. So other languages often do. Other languages have very specific words describing very specific genetic or familial relationships, and we're just kind of stuck with aunt, uncle, cousin.
Yeah, the NLT says they married into the clans instead of saying families. They say married into the clans of Manasseh, son of Joseph. Thus their inheritance of land remained within their ancestral tribe. So kind of using a little bit broader terms instead of saying family there.
Looks like
Robin said, did they have Romeo and Juliet situations of forbidden love? Yeah, I mean, I was thinking that too as I was reading this. So was there, a young girl who fell in love with a person outside of their ancestral clan? I mean, I would think there was probably,
most likely,
one of those, and then they just wouldn't have their inheritance anymore.
Right.
I think what God is saying here is if that happened, I'm sure their family would get really upset, but she wouldn't be able to take what she had inherited with her because God is setting a clear boundary, so she could marry outside of the tribe, but she wouldn't take the inheritance. That would just go to another sister, or sister and her husband, and stay within the tribe. That's what God is saying. God's boundaries are the permanent boundaries.
And again, we have to remember that.
But I thought that too, Robin. I thought the same thing.
We especially as 21st century Americans, we have a very, very strong opinion of marriage for love.
Yes.
Which is appropriate.
Right.
Okay. But other cultures throughout the world, even to this day, marriage is oftentimes thought of. Yes, it's great when there's mutual affection, but it's also considered a business transaction or a community transaction, solidifying a community or solidifying relationships between various families, and there's often I'll use the term political and economic motivation in marriage. So I'm sure there was several Romeo and Juliet type of forbidden love romances.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been upsetting to the family because they know God's, word and they know His desires here. But ultimately, I think they could have allowed it. What I'm just surmising from how the word is being stated here is that it could have been allowed. Would have been forbidden and upsetting, but then they could have been allowed. But the woman wouldn't be able to take any inheritance of land with her.
Right, and that,
So,
and I mean, those situations apply to this day where people walk away from
inheritances
and stuff
because
like that.
of,
for the sake of the person that they want
truly
to
love, Mm-hmm.
So good question, Robin. So verse 13.
These are the commandments and the ordinances which the Lord commanded to the sons of Israel through Moses in the plains of Moab by the Jordan opposite Jericho.
Okay.
Telling us where this all transpired.
Right, and then we're reminded that this is the last verse in the book of Numbers, and we're reminded that they are literally as close as they can possibly be, just on the other side of the river, to the promised land without being there yet. How do we know this? Because Moses is still talking.
Right.
Moses is still talking, and God has said that He's told him, you will not enter the promised land. You will die.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So excellent.
And I think that's it. Yep. That's it. We
Dan's
did
got a
it.
black screen. We did it. We
did
finished.
It. Thank you all. Thank you one
But
and
we're not
all.
all the way done because we're going to do a summary next week. But we hope, I really, really hope that you guys will participate by, between now and next week, pray about, looking through the book of Numbers and review it and just pray about, is there one verse or one concept or something that really stood out to you that spoke to your heart, we'd love to hear that. So
and
thank
again,
you
the
for joining us. And next week will be the summary, and then in between. So next week, Thursday is May something, I don't know. 3rd or something. March. Sorry, I jumped ahead a month. A couple months. So it's March something, but then March 5th, and then daylight savings happens
Oh, yeah.
that following weekend. So, and then we'll be starting Deuteronomy on March 12th.
Yep.
Thursday night, March 12th. So that's the plan.
Oh,
Thank
thank you,
you.
Robin. Thank you, Angie. Thank you,
you,
everybody.
guys.
Thank you, one and all.
Thanks for joining
So, yeah,
us. We
so-
just so between now and then, think about your Twitter standout thought, and we'd love to have you guys join us next week and continue on. We're almost through the book of the Torah. So those of you that's been starting with the first 5 books of the Bible is called the Torah. So so we are almost starting the last book of the
This is
Torah. So
exciting. It's
super
exciting because
exciting.
many Christians go their entire lives without knowing the book of the Torah.
Right.
And at least we as a group have read through it, and we have a great foundation for helping us understand the New Testament so much better.
Right.
And so thank you one and all for being so diligent and so faithful, and we really appreciate your comments and your showing up every week.
And you can't say we never end early, because here we are. Finally, we're ending early. Have a good night.
Good
Blessings,
night, all.
you guys.
Blessings.
Love you.